I should have seen the warning signs so much earlier, but I guess that's how these things go. My name is Randy. I'm 34 years old, and up until 2 months ago, I was married to Elaine, who's 36. She had a son from her previous marriage, Craig, 19, who never liked me from the get-go. He made that abundantly clear, but I did my best to ignore it. After all, it's not easy being a teen with a new stepfather. I gave him space, paid for a lot of his expenses, and tried to be supportive. Or at least that's what I told myself. If I'm being brutally honest, I suppose I could come off as controlling about finances. Maybe I was so worried about money that I nagged Elaine to rein in her shopping sprees. But I never imagined either of them would betray me the way they did. The final straw fell on one of the worst nights of my life. I'd just come off a brutal night shift, 12 hours on the factory floor, welding metal parts, dealing with the incessant noise that made my ears ring. My ankles were already throbbing from standing so long, and I only wanted one thing: to go home and get some sleep. Around 3:30 a.m., a text from Elaine buzzed on my phone. Rain's coming in from the living room roof, getting water everywhere. Fix it ASAP. I read it 3 times, rubbing my eyes because I couldn't believe the timing. Was I upset? Sure, but it was our house, right? Water damage can be catastrophic if you let it go. So, half dead on my feet, I drove home through a pouring storm that lashed against my windshield like it wanted to break through the glass. The entire drive I was cursing under my breath. My back felt stiff as rebar, and my eyelids were trying to slip shut at every stoplight. Sometimes you just can't catch a break. I got home a little before 4 in the morning. I grabbed a ladder from the garage and fumbled around for the tools I'd need. My breath puffed out in sharp bursts, partly from the cold and partly from frustration. The wind whipped across my face the moment I climbed onto the roof, and the rain was coming down sideways. I muttered, "Christ, I'm gonna slip and break my neck," about a dozen times. My hands scraped on the roof tiles, leaving little bloody smears on the shingles. Took me the better part of an hour, but I eventually found the spot. Some shingles had come loose, or so it seemed. I nailed them back in place, sealed them with roofing tar, and tried not to think about how my hands were stinging like open wounds. When I finally crawled down, I felt like I'd gone 10 rounds in a boxing ring. By that point, the exhaustion was bone deep. The only thing keeping me from collapsing right there on the lawn was the thought of my bed. Inside, I found Elaine in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone. She was wearing pajama pants and looked freshly showered. I remember blinking rainwater from my eyes, trying not to drip all over the floor. "Leak's fixed, but we'll need to get somebody to double check once the storm's over," I said. "Might be some damage to the attic insulation." She barely glanced up. "Cool," she replied, voice flat, like I was a waiter handing her the check. Not a hint of relief or gratitude. If anything, she seemed bored. I tried not to let it bother me. I chalked it up to the late hour, or maybe the tension we'd been having about money. I remember saying something like, "I'm gonna crash for a bit," then stumbling to our bedroom and practically face-planting on the bed, jeans, jacket, and all. My last thought was, thank God that's over. Little did I know the real storm was just starting. When I woke up, sunlight filtered through the blinds. My phone read 9:30 a.m., so I'd been asleep about 4 hours. Elaine was standing next to me, arms crossed, her jaw set like she was holding back an eruption of fury. Craig was leaning in the doorframe, arms folded, a smirk on his face. I blinked the sleep from my eyes, my back still screaming from the rooftop ordeal. "What's going on?" I croaked, fumbling for my phone, trying to figure out if I'd overslept or something. The room felt oddly empty. That's when I saw them. 3 big black trash bags lined up by the closet, clothes spilling out of one. My shirts, my jeans, my stuff. "Get up," Elaine said coldly. "You're leaving." I sat there stunned. A flush of anger pricked my skin. "Leaving? Elaine? What are you talking about?" She didn't hesitate. "I'm done carrying you," she snapped. "You're dead weight. I deserve better. I found better." Her eyes burned with a loathing I'd never quite seen before, and they flicked towards something taped to the refrigerator door, visible through the bedroom's open doorway. It was a note, my name scribbled in big loops. Actually, it said, "You're dead weight. Get out. I'm find a real man." I saw that last line. I'm find a real man, and my mind reared back, trying to process it. My body felt too heavy to move. "What the hell is this?" I finally asked. "You can't just—" Craig laughed under his breath. He actually tossed my truck keys at me. They landed on the bed. "Mom says go cry somewhere else. Don't come back," he said, that smirk never leaving his face. That's when I noticed my wallet on the nightstand, empty. The $200 I'd had was gone. I whipped my head up to glare at them both. You took my money? Elaine shrugged, looking almost bored. Joint money, if you ask me, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I've covered for your sorry ass long enough. Covered for me? I exploded, not caring if I sounded hysterical. I've been paying the mortgage and bills, working night shifts. Save it, she spat. I'm seeing someone else. Someone who's not a loser with a dead-end job. You've got 5 minutes to get your stuff out of here before I call the cops. My head swam, torn between anger and heartbreak. She's seeing someone else? My gut churned. Was that why she'd been so distant? Why she had that smug attitude lately? Craig stepped forward, his grin warping into something nastier. I set them up, actually, he said proudly. My boss at the car shop. Mom's been seeing him for months. He's got cash, unlike you. I stared at him in disbelief. You? I sputtered. You arranged dates for your mom? With your boss? He shrugged. Yeah. Steve's way cooler than you. Things might have gone violent if I hadn't been so drained. My left hand was still throbbing from the roof tar. Instead, I forced myself to stand. Elaine, let's talk about this rationally, I said, stepping toward the door. If we're separating, we'll need— Out! Elaine shrieked, sounding like she was right on the edge of losing control. Now! So that was that. In a daze, I stuffed whatever I could into those trash bags. I tried to pull a t-shirt on. All the while, my brain repeated. She found someone else. She planned this. Craig had his phone pointed at me, filming, eyes gleaming with malice. Just in case you do something stupid, he said. You know, in case you get violent. My hands balled into fists, but I held it in. They wanted me to do something rash so they could call the cops. Instead, I marched to the living room, ignoring the ache in my spine, ignoring the fact that my hand still had dried blood from the roof. I saw the note on the fridge again. You're dead weight. Get out. I'm find a real man. I yanked it off and crumpled it. I turned around one last time, saw Elaine's furious glare and Craig's smug face. I wanted to scream, "You're in my house!" But part of me wondered if we'd put both of our names on the deed. Everything after we got married was such a blur. I left with my clothes in garbage bags and a heartbreak so intense it felt like my chest was caving in. The door slammed. The deadbolt clicked. In 10 minutes, I'd gone from husband to homeless man. By noon that same day, I was parked behind a 24-hour supermarket, numb and cold despite the warm sun. My phone calls and texts to Elaine went unanswered. I ate stale crackers for lunch, half hoping this was a dream, but the rawness in my scraped palms told me otherwise. I tried to lie down in the truck's cab, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elaine's face full of contempt, Craig's mocking smirk. I barely slept. The next morning, I used a day pass at the local gym to shower and brush my teeth. I stared at myself in the mirror. Puffy eyes, stubbled cheeks. A tired, middle-aged man whose entire life had just imploded. The irony stung. For years, I'd kept track of every dollar we spent, scolded Elaine for buying too many fancy shoes, tried to manage the budget responsibly. Sure, I might have been controlling about money, but look where it got me. Kicked out, broke, humiliated. Night 2 in the truck was worse. My back screamed every time I shifted positions. I had a single blanket over me, listening to the hum of passing cars. My thoughts churned like a pot left to boil over, replaying Elaine's sneer. I've found someone else. Sometime around 2 a.m., I dozed off, only to be startled awake by a knock on the window. A security guard brandishing a flashlight told me I couldn't sleep in the lot overnight. So I drove to another all-night location, cursing under my breath. By morning, my phone had a bank notification. The joint account was empty. Of course, she had drained it. A red wave of fury washed over me. Years of scrimping and saving gone. Work was a blur of exhaustion and half-hearted small talk. Wyatt, a coworker who'd always been friendly, pulled me aside on my lunch break. He said, "Randy, you look like you haven't slept in a week." "What's up, man?" "Nothing," I mumbled, but my voice wobbled. And that was enough for Wyatt to keep pushing until I finally spilled everything. He stared at me, jaw slack. "Dude," he said, "stay on my couch. You can't live in your truck. That's insane." I didn't want to impose, but I had nowhere else. So that's how I ended up in Wyatt's tiny living room, on a couch with a creaky fold-out bed, my meager belongings in a corner. By the third night, I had a plan. Check the deed on the house. My grandfather had willed that place to me years before. I was almost certain it was mine alone, but I'd never updated it after marriage. If it was truly only in my name, she had no legal right to keep me out. I ran into Elaine's cousin, Sabrina, at a gas station a week later. She was an odd one, never warmed to me, but that day she looked almost ashamed to run into me. She blurted out, "I'm so sorry for what happened. Elaine's been planning to kick you out for months. She told everybody you were worthless, a total drain on her life. She's got another man, you know." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yeah, I know," I said quietly. "Craig's boss, apparently." Sabrina nodded, gaze darting around like she worried someone would see her talking to me. Then she revealed something horrifying. The leak that night? Elaine had manufactured it with a garden hose. She wanted me so tired from working all night and climbing on the roof that I'd be too exhausted to fight back. Sabrina even said Elaine bragged about it at some family gathering, crowing about how I'd never see it coming. "I'm sorry," Sabrina whispered again, her eyes flicking to the ground. "I should have warned you." That was the moment everything inside me crystallized into a cold, steely determination. It wasn't just that she kicked me out. She set me up. She humiliated me on purpose. I found a lawyer named Frank Mulligan, recommended by Wyatt. Frank was old school, gray hair, sharp suits, and a sharper tongue. I showed him the deed. He confirmed it was solely in my name. Elaine and I never filed new paperwork after we married, meaning legally, the house belonged to me alone. Frank's eyes glinted with something like triumph when he read the documents. "In this state, an inherited property that's kept separate usually remains separate," he said. "You've got a strong case." But what he discovered next turned my stomach. A $25,000 personal loan Elaine had taken out, using my house as collateral. Forged my signature, no less. She'd bragged on social media about remodeling the house, even buying Craig a new car. Now it made sense how Craig had been driving around in a flashy vehicle. Meanwhile, I was exiled to Wyatt's couch. That was the final straw. Frank said it was straight-up fraud and he'd love to prosecute. I gave him the green light. "Let's do it," I said. Frank filed the paperwork swiftly. First, a formal eviction notice. Since the house was mine, I had every right to remove them. Second, a lawsuit for the forged loan. "Don't tip them off," Frank told me. "We need the element of surprise." So I kept my head down, living cheaply. I canceled all joint credit cards, opened new bank accounts, changed passwords, everything to separate myself from Elaine. I also braced myself for the storm to come. Sure enough, the day the sheriff was set to serve the eviction notice was nerve-wracking. I barely slept. My stomach churned as I followed the patrol car to my own front door, staying a few steps behind the sheriff. At 9 a.m. on a Monday, we walked up the driveway. My heart pounded so loud it felt like it was in my ears. Craig answered in gym shorts, no shirt, looking groggy. Elaine rushed over in a robe, confusion morphing into fury when she saw me behind the sheriff. "What is this?" she snapped, voice trembling. The sheriff was all business. "Ma'am," he said, "we have an eviction order. You and your son must vacate the premises within 48 hours. He handed her the papers. "The property belongs to Randy. This order is effective immediately." For a split second, Elaine's face went slack with shock. Then color flooded her cheeks. "This is my house," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You can't do this!" Frank, standing calmly to one side, cleared his throat. "Actually, the deed is in Randy's name alone," he said. "And we have evidence of financial fraud you committed by forging his signature on a loan. You need to leave." Craig puffed out his chest, stepping towards me. "Who do you think you are?" he snarled. "You think you can just waltz back in here because of some technicality?" I held up a hand. "You threw me out," I snapped. "But you didn't realize I still own this place. Now get your stuff and go." Elaine's voice trembled with rage. She turned on the sheriff, her face blotchy. "He's harassing me. He's controlling. He's been forcing me to—" The sheriff cut her off, telling her to read the order. She skimmed it, eyes wild, then turned to me, spitting out her words. "You worthless bastard! I should have left you years ago. Where am I supposed to go? You can't just—" "You have 48 hours, the sheriff repeated sternly. "If you don't leave voluntarily, we'll enforce the eviction physically." He leaned in. "Don't make this worse." Craig pointed a finger at me, sneer returning. "You'll be crawling back once you realize how lonely you are," he taunted. "Mom only stayed with you out of pity. This is going to come back and bite you. You watch." I felt my temper flare, but Frank had warned me to remain calm. I forced a cold smile, locking eyes with Craig. 48 hours. Anything left after that goes in the dumpster, including your gaming rig, which was my money, by the way." He lunged forward, fist balled, but the sheriff stepped between us, hand on his belt. Don't, the sheriff said in a low, firm tone. Craig paused, chest heaving. Elaine stood there, tears forming now, as if shifting tactics from rage to sympathy. Randy, she pleaded, please, we've been married 7 years. You can't just toss me out. I swallowed the knot in my throat, remembering those nights in my truck, the heartbreak. You did it to me, I said quietly, when you changed the locks and took my wallet. Now we're even. I turned and walked away, ignoring whatever curses they hurled after me. My heart hammered a strange rhythm, part guilt, part triumph. But I tamped down any remorse. They brought this on themselves. True to their word, Elaine and Craig bombarded my phone with calls that afternoon. Threats, then pleas, then more threats. I forwarded everything to Frank. By the second day, I woke up to find 47 missed messages. Elaine's tone had swung wildly from "I'll ruin your life" to "Please, Randy, we have nowhere else to go." I responded once, saying all communication should go through my lawyer. Then I blocked her. 48 hours after the sheriff's visit, I returned. Frank and I arrived with the sheriff right behind us in case things went sideways. My hands felt clammy on the steering wheel. I dreaded the confrontation, but I also wanted them gone. Surprisingly, there was a U-Haul in the driveway. Elaine was on the porch, eyes red and puffy. She looked at me with such venom, it was almost shocking. I could see she'd been crying. You bastard, she hissed as I walked up. I didn't reply, just stepped inside to assess the damage. The place was a wreck. Broken glass, furniture overturned, fresh paint swatches on the walls, half finished. The kitchen cabinet doors were removed, strewn about. It looked like they'd tried to remodel but gave up halfway. Or did it out of spite. The sheriff warned them not to take anything that was built into the house, appliances, fixtures, that kind of thing. Elaine barked at him. Those are my new appliances. But, of course, they'd been bought with my stolen, fraudulently acquired loan. She had no claim. I rummaged around, seeing if they'd taken anything irreplaceable. Some stuff was gone. Family photos, random knickknacks. She'd stolen them, out of spite maybe. But the biggest relief was that the structure was still sound. My heart sank at the holes in the drywall, though. There were at least 5. The swirl of anger and pity inside me left a bitter taste in my mouth. I headed back outside. Elaine tried to follow me, tears streaming. Randy, how can you do this? I'm your wife. Well, was. Doesn't that mean anything? I stared at her, remembering the note. You're dead weight. Get out. I'm find a real man. And her face that morning, brimming with scorn. You made your choice, I said, voice hollow. The sheriff gently stepped between us, and Elaine seemed to realize I wasn't going to budge. She let out a choked sob, stumbling back to the U-Haul. Craig was nowhere to be seen. Maybe he was off sulking or trying to salvage that fancy car. Either way, they left, and for the first time in months, I was alone in my own house. I remember kneeling in the living room, just staring at the chipped hardwood floors. My heart hammered with a weird sense of liberation. The worst was over, I told myself, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. The quiet was deafening. Then I called Wyatt and said, Bring some pizza, man. We've got a house to fix. Wyatt and a few co-workers helped me piece the house back together that first weekend. We patched walls, hauled out broken furniture. They told me to keep my spirits up, that I dodged a bullet by discovering how cruel Elaine was. Maybe they were right, but it still felt like a kick in the gut. 7 years thrown away. Elaine's sister Alexandra showed up a few days later. She said Elaine and Craig were staying in her basement, but that her controlling husband Stetson was making life miserable. My eyebrows shot up. Apparently, Elaine's lavish lifestyle had come to a grinding halt, and with no money left, she was at the mercy of a jerk even worse than me, if you'd believe it. Alexandra needed help escaping her own toxic marriage. I gave her some resources, helped her contact a women's shelter. If nothing else, this fiasco taught me how important it was to have a backup plan. A week or two passed quietly. I spent my evenings patching holes in the walls, painting over the hideous color Elaine had started. The nights were still haunted by insomnia, though. Sometimes I woke in a cold sweat, dreaming that Elaine or Craig was looming over my bed, hurling insults. But each day I felt a little more stable. Then it all erupted again. Elaine had apparently tried to settle with some landlord for a new place, but she had no credit left. Her fraud was catching up to her. The loan company was pressing charges. Her fancy boyfriend, Steve, vanished. I heard rumors from Sabrina that he'd ghosted Elaine the second she mentioned the stolen loan money and her eviction. Typical. If Elaine thought she'd found a real man to fix her problems, she'd been wrong. One morning, I stepped onto my porch, sipping coffee, when a tow truck pulled up unannounced. At first, I was confused. Then I realized they were repossessing the furniture and appliances that had been financed under the forged loan. I saw Craig come running from down the street, shouting, "Stop! You can't take that, it's ours." The driver said, "I have the order right here." Then he started loading a brand new washing machine onto the truck bed. Craig, face red with rage, tried to jump onto the flatbed. He was screaming, "I'll kill you if you take my stuff." The driver threatened to call the cops, and I immediately called the sheriff myself, feeling my stomach knot with apprehension. Meanwhile, Elaine showed up, shrieking, "You can't do this! Randy, tell them to stop!" I shook my head. "This is out of my hands," I said. "You financed this stuff illegally. The bank is repossessing it." She shot me a glare that could peel paint. Then, in a move that left me speechless, she stormed over to the sheriff, who had just arrived, and shoved him. "This is my house!" she yelled. "These are my things! That man is controlling me! He's behind all of this!" The sheriff stumbled back, eyes blazing with anger at being assaulted. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it behind her back in a swift motion. "Lady, that's assault on an officer!" She fought back, flailing her free hand, tears streaking her cheeks. "You piece of trash! You can't arrest me! Don't you know who I am?" Craig tried to intervene, but two more deputies arrived, wrestling him to the side. By the time the dust settled, Elaine was face down on the pavement, arms pinned behind her. It was an ugly, humiliating sight. She kept kicking her legs, shrieking, "Get off me! You'll pay for this!" But the deputies were having none of it. I just stood there numb as they hauled her up and led her, still cursing and spitting, to a squad car. She spent a few days in jail, from what I heard, before being released on bail. I might have felt sorry for her once, but the only emotion left in me was a weird heaviness. She made this bed herself. Now she had to lie in it. You would think after that arrest, after being tossed out and losing nearly everything, Elaine would leave me alone. But fate had other plans. I'd installed new locks and a security system, but I still slept restlessly. Sometimes I felt I was being watched. I brushed it off as paranoia until the night I heard glass shatter downstairs. It was around 2 a.m. I jolted awake, heart hammering. My mind shouted, "Burglars!" I hurriedly opened my bedside table and grabbed my Magnum revolver. My entire body shook as I slipped into the hallway. I could hear voices downstairs, hushed, urgent. I flipped on the flashlight strapped under the barrel of my Magnum. Creeping down the stairs, I felt my breath hitch. There, standing in my living room, rummaging through drawers, were Elaine and Craig. The back window was broken, shards of glass scattered on the floor. Craig gripped a crowbar, while Elaine rooted through the cabinets like she was hunting for something. Maybe documents, maybe cash, who knows? "Stop right there!" I roared, shining the light on them. My hands were trembling so hard I thought the Magnum might slip. Elaine spun around, eyes wild, hair a mess. She looked half deranged, like a cornered animal. "Randy," she gasped, "put that Magnum down! We just came to get some stuff I left behind. Personal items, that's all!" I barked out a harsh laugh, adrenaline surging. "Personal items? With a crowbar at 2 in the morning? You broke my window!" Craig raised the crowbar, stepping towards me. "Give us the money," he snarled. "I know you have some stashed away. We lost everything because of you." I tightened my grip on the trigger. My voice came out low and ragged. "Stay back, Craig. I'm warning you." He took another step, his eyes glinting with a desperate fury. I fired a warning shot into the ceiling, plaster raining down in a cloud of dust. The explosion of sound left my ears ringing. Elaine screamed, throwing herself backward. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screeched. "You could have killed us!" My heart hammered so violently I thought I'd pass out, but I kept the Magnum trained on them. "Drop the crowbar," I said, voice shaking. "Both of you, stay where you are." Craig stared at the hole in the ceiling, eyes bulging. His face went ashen, and he dropped the crowbar with a clang. Elaine began to sob, pressing her palms to her head. "You lunatic! You'd shoot your own family!" I shook my head. "You're not my family anymore," I spat. "You threw me out! You forged my name! You tried to ruin me!" In my peripheral vision, I could see the security system blinking red. My phone was upstairs, but the alarm's silent sensor would have alerted the police. Sure enough, I heard distant sirens growing louder. Elaine tried to sidle toward me, tears streaming down her cheeks, voice trembling in that manipulative way. "Randy, please," she whispered. I just forgot some important papers here, and my mother's jewelry." "Bull," I said. "You broke a window and had a crowbar. Don't move, or I swear." My voice quavered, but the threat was real. Red and blue lights strobed through the windows as the sirens crescendoed. Moments later, cops burst in through the front door, guns drawn. I immediately set the magnum on the floor, raised my hands, and backed away. The officers took one look at Elaine and Craig, the shattered glass, the crowbar on the floor, and they knew enough. One of them recognized Elaine from her prior scuffle with the law. "Hands behind your head!" they shouted, and both Elaine and Craig complied, the color draining from their faces. Elaine started babbling, pointing at me. "He's a maniac! He shot at us! This is my house, too!" One of the cops shook his head. "Ma'am, you've been evicted. You have no legal right to be here. The glass is broken inward. There's a crowbar on the floor. This looks like burglary." Craig tried to protest. "He owes me money for college tuition. He's my stepdad, and he promised—" An officer snorted. "That's not how this works, son," he said. "You don't break into a house with a crowbar to settle a tuition dispute." Elaine sobbed as the cops cuffed her, pressing her face to the floor when she tried to resist. She let out this unholy shriek, tears and mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Randy, don't let them arrest me! We were just taking what's mine!" I watched, unmoving, as she was lifted to her feet, arms twisted behind her back, hair hanging in disarray around her face. She glowered at me with pure hatred, spitting words like venom. "You'll regret this, Randy. This is all because you're a control freak. You always were." Craig, pale and sweaty, said nothing. He just stared at me with a mixture of fury and fear. Another officer let him out, shoved him into the squad car. Elaine kept ranting until they shut the car door, muffling her shrill voice. Neighbors had emerged onto their porches, watching the commotion, eyes wide in the flashing lights. It felt like hours before the cops finished taking my statement. I explained how I'd set off a warning shot, how I was in fear for my life when they advanced with a crowbar. The police scoured the scene, found plenty of evidence of forced entry. They told me I'd be called to testify in court if it went that far. I nodded, exhaustion already creeping in. As the squad cars pulled away, taking Elaine and Craig with them, I stood alone in the living room. The clock on the wall read 3 a.m. My house smelled like drywall dust and fear. I gazed at the bullet hole in the ceiling, my arms wrapped around myself, trying to stop trembling. At some point, Wyatt showed up, half asleep but worried. He helped me sweep up the broken glass. "You okay, man?" he asked softly. I nodded, not trusting my voice, because I wasn't sure if I was okay. Months ago, I was a husband living a normal, if tense, life, albeit with financial fights and a stepson who disliked me. Now I had literally fired a gun in my own home, witnessed my wife face down on the floor, handcuffed, screaming like a banshee. The surrealism of it felt nauseating. The next day, I learned that Elaine and Craig were both being charged. Burglary, trespassing, and assault with a weapon for Craig's crowbar. Elaine also had her prior charges of assaulting the sheriff. There was talk of a possible plea deal, but it didn't sound promising for them. She'd likely face jail time or at least strict probation, and Craig would carry a criminal record. Even if I'd once cared about them, it was too late for that. A week later, I went to a follow-up hearing regarding the fraudulent loan. The judge slapped Elaine with restitution orders and flagged her for felony forgery. It wouldn't surprise me if she ended up behind bars for a stretch, though she might weasel her way out on some technicality. Craig's college dreams were toast. I cut him off financially, and he didn't have the means to pay on his own. He pitched a fit, but the law didn't force me to finance a stepson who'd actively conspired against me. As they were led out of the courtroom, Elaine shot me one last glare, pure malice. "I'll never forgive you," she hissed.